And on that note, I would now like to ask the Honourable Prime Minister, if you don't mind, providing our audience with a general introduction to your beautiful country, how the economy is doing, and also some comments on how things are going in terms of the current pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominic, and good morning to everyone. I wish all of you were here in St. Lucia with us today. It's an absolutely beautiful day. Dominic, you know, this pandemic has been unprecedented in the world, but I don't need to say that to everybody because obviously it's been a global phenomenon. I found myself extremely well placed, being the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, to really deal with the fallout of the pandemic. And I say that to you because I was at one point the Vice President of Marketing and Sales for Air Jamaica, which was a major airline here in the Caribbean, when we had the 9/11 crisis. I was also the Minister of Tourism for St. Lucia when we had the global economic recession in 2008 to 2010. And I've been the Prime Minister of St. Lucia for the last 4 years, and I have been dealing with the fallout of climate change. I say that because really the pandemic is all those three events wrapped in one. The fear of flying and some of the fallout from that of 9/11, combined with the economic recession that was created in 2008, 2009, and certainly for a small island developing state, attempting to deal with climate change in a global architecture that was not really designed for small island developing states. And the pandemic has actually captured all three. And because of that reason, I was able to anticipate as early as the end of January that we were heading to a situation in which the country would see, and globally we would see, that travel would have been shut down. And given the importance of the tourism sector in St. Lucia, what that would have been, the fallout of that would have been economically. I was able to work very quickly with our central bank. So St. Lucia is a member of 8 countries that share a common currency. We have a central bank that protects that currency rate. And that's a very important point to understand. So the global or the economic easing, quantitative easing that we have seen as a solution by many countries that have simply printed money to their governments, that is not something that's available to St. Lucia. Our central bank preserves the exchange rate of our currency. And while the legal level, the prudential level of reserves is 60%, we have maintained a reserve rate of almost 100% for the last 15, 20 years. And certainly at no time has the reserve rate gone below 80%. And as a result of that, we have a fixed currency rate of 2.7 or 2.67 to be exact, to the US dollar. And we have felt that given that the US is our biggest trading partner, having a fixed exchange rate gives us the stability that we need. But we were able to give advance notice to the central bank, who then helped us with the IMF and the World Bank and what we call the Caribbean Development Bank, to anticipate where this was going and what our needs were going to be. So we clearly understood from early that in funding our budget, which we have just passed, in fact, we're passing the second part of our budget next week, Tuesday, that we probably would not be able to depend on our traditional regional bond market, because given the level of uncertainty that the business community had. And such, we were able to fully fund our budget for this year. Using the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, using the World Bank, and repurposing some of the loans that we had with them, using the the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. They have a rapid response facility which is available to all countries, as well as working with our central bank, our commercial banks, and increasing our overdraft facilities. So St. Lucia was able to raise about 900 million EC dollars, which is approximately 20% of our GDP. So not something that I'm very proud of as a Minister of Finance, having to borrow that quantum of money, but I am happy that St. Lucia was in a position to do so. And why was that the case? When we came into government, in the 4 years in government, we have been able to grow the economy every single year. We've lowered our unemployment rate, which was at 25%, to just over 15%. And more importantly, we're able to bring down our youth unemployment significantly. We increased the revenues of the country. When I came in, we were averaging $70 million a month. Last year, we averaged $100 million a month. And our debt to GDP ratio, when I came in, was in the high 60s. And we were able to bring that number down this year to 59%. And I think that gave the confidence to these international financial institutions, as well as our central bank, that St. Lucia was really heading on a good path. Sadly for the world, every single country has had to do some form of what I've been speaking about. And therefore, persons or countries' balance sheets are going to look pretty ugly by the end of the year. But the IMF, the managing director, Kristalina, has indicated that most of these countries should try to borrow as much money as available to them to weather this storm. Also, luckily for St. Lucia, that we had several major projects that we were about to start. We negotiated a loan with the Taiwanese government to build our international airport. So that project, which is a $200 million project, which would triple the size of our current airport terminal, and along with resurfacing our runway and building a taxiway and modernizing all of our navigational equipment, has begun and will take about 2 years to build. We have already commenced work on a major new hospital in the southern part of the island, and we are intending to make it into a world-class tertiary level hospital. We had already fixed loans prior to the COVID for over $150 million in road rehabilitation projects, and we are spending about another $100 million on upgrading our water supply. So one is in desilting our major dam here, as well as building 3 major or additional water outtakes throughout the length and breadth of the country. We're also in the process of commencing construction on a new police headquarters that would also include 6 court facilities. And St. Lucia is now moving from the traditional customs department to a border control department, where we would integrate customs with immigration, with quarantining, and the Marine Police. So this is something we're very excited about, and we're in the process or in negotiations with building a new headquarters facility for that new department. I say that because the timing of these projects are critical, and that we have a significant amount of activity on the ground despite COVID. So in terms of how did we handle COVID from a health perspective, again, we were very lucky that we made some very tough decisions early in the day. And the result has been that St. Lucia has only had 19 cases of COVID in St. Lucia. None of these cases ever developed to the point that anyone had to go to hospital. And up till now, knock on wood, no one has died because of COVID.
Amazing.
So it's a remarkable record that we've achieved here on the island. In the meanwhile, we clearly have been strengthening, like the rest of the world, our capacity to be able to handle any potential fallout. So We had a brand new hospital that we had not moved into. So during the COVID period, we transitioned to that new hospital, and we have now invested about $7 million on converting the old hospital into a 90-bed respiratory hospital. And we worked very quickly and early with the Cuban government, and we were able to get 110 nurses and doctors who've been in St. Lucia now for 2 months, and they're the ones who are actually operating that respiratory hospital. So we've managed the situation extremely well. The Caribbean has also done extremely well. I'm proud of the fact that St. Lucia has done the best of all the Caribbean islands. But I want to reiterate that the entire Caribbean has done remarkably well in dealing with the COVID fallout. We are collectively working as a group in the Caribbean to establish protocols for the reopening of our borders. 2 of the countries have already reopened their borders, and St. Lucia and several of the other islands are about to reopen early July. So St. Lucia had reopened its borders starting on June 4th, but the protocols that we had put in place, which required persons to be pre-tested, and the fact that the only country that we have our borders open with is the US. And the reason for that is that the US is the only one that allows persons to travel back into the United States without going into quarantine. So Canada and the UK, which are 2 other large markets for us, both those countries still have protocols in place that if tourists were to come down to St. Lucia for vacation, when they return, they would have to go back into quarantine. And we are hoping that both Canada and the UK will agree to include the Caribbean as part of their bubble. But they have not done that as yet, but we're hoping that they're going to do that relatively soon. So despite the fact that we were open from June 4th, none of the airlines actually commenced flights into St. Lucia because people cannot get tested in the US easily. The 2 countries that have proceeded to open, both those countries now are doing testing on arrival. And St. Lucia now has brought in rapid tests here in St. Lucia. We've been training our staff that we're hoping that by the beginning of July that we would introduce that same protocol. And we do have flights scheduled from Miami, from Atlanta, and from New York, beginning in the early part of July. British Airways has also indicated that they're looking to start service sometime by the end of July as well. So we're very excited at that possibility. The good news, like 9/11, when the world had shut down as well, what we're seeing is a petted up demand despite the economic fallout. And I can say this to you because in absolute terms, the Caribbean, while very dependent on tourism, makes up a very small part of the global market share. In fact, the Caribbean altogether is only about 2% of the world's market share in tourism. And St. Lucia is only 2% of the Caribbean's market share. So despite the global contraction, it doesn't take a lot of numbers in order for us to actually see a return to the numbers that we were before, and even possibly growth of that market. One of the things that we have done here in St. Lucia, and we started a couple of years ago, was working with the Europeans with regards to their global taxation policy. And St. Lucia has moved to what's called a territorial tax structure. It's the same system that's currently in Singapore and Hong Kong and in Panama, in Malta and some other countries. And basically what that system is that we do not tax any revenue that's earned outside of St. Lucia. And that applies both to St. Lucians as well as to any foreigners that are living in St. Lucia. We also introduced our Headquarters Act. And what our Headquarters Act allows is for companies who move their international or regional headquarters to St. Lucia, they need to have either rent their own space or to their own office space or office building. They need to hire a minimum of 10 persons And those persons can either come from abroad and would not require work permits, or from St. Lucia. And none of those individuals, the individuals from abroad, nor the persons they employ from St. Lucia, have to pay any any personal income taxes. And the company benefits from an indefinite corporate tax, as well as all of their office equipment or technical equipment is allowed to be brought into St. Lucia duty-free. Why do I bring that up? Because we've seen since COVID, a lot of individuals, chairmen, managing directors of companies who've realized that they can operate offline from their office space. And as such, many individuals have now said, I don't need to live in a big city. And so this piece of legislation, along with the fact that the infrastructure in St. Lucia, broadband width, the education system that we have here in St. Lucia, the new tertiary level hospital that I've spoken about this morning, along with our air access to Miami, to Atlanta, to New York, to Toronto, to Chicago, and to London, allows persons to be here and still have global access to anywhere in the world. And we're now seeing high net worth individuals looking to take advantage of this facility. So clearly, combined with our Citizenship by Investment Program and this piece of legislation, it's making St. Lucia an extremely attractive destination. We already have 9 companies set up in St. Lucia. And since COVID, we have several applications, as I said, of individuals who are high net worth individuals running multiple companies and are now finding it very convenient to be able to set up operations in St. Lucia. I would like to think that our success with COVID has also been a very attracting and alluring factor. I mean, for a destination of our size, that's something as global and far-reaching as this pandemic, and for us to have been able to isolate ourselves, I think has really given a great boost of confidence for persons looking to set up their operations at a different part of the world. So on that note, I would like to end, and certainly I'm free to answer any questions that anyone would have. But just in summarizing, we have now successfully funded our budget for the year. We have major capital investment programs, which we believe in the next couple of months will help offset some of the losses of our tourism economy. And thirdly, we are extremely encouraged by the response we're seeing on the market. St. Lucia just launched a really fantastic marketing campaign to our primary markets. But we are encouraged and believe that certainly by the end of the year, that we would have returned to our pre-COVID numbers, and that there's a possibility for the next 2 to 3 years that we should see significant growth in our tourism market.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. On the Q&A, just for all in attendance, there is a Q&A function which you can certainly make use of. Just before I move on to Nestor to discuss the Citizenship by Investment Program, all the information you've provided here, it's great to see St. Lucia so sort of resilient in what has certainly been a very challenging time for all. How does the Citizenship by Investment Program itself fit into the government's plans in terms of budgets? I mean, these programs are, of course, a very effective use and channel for foreign direct investment. In terms of the CBI program itself, how does that fit into the government's and certainly the outlook going forward?
So thank you for asking, Dominic. St. Lucia has from the onset made it very clear that our Citizenship by Investment Program, the monies from the donations will be going into an economic fund. The economic fund is managed by an independent board and with some very clear criteria. One, the monies can be used to help reduce debt and also make capital investment programs, investments in St. Lucia. And so we do not allow the revenues from our citizenship program to go into our recurrent revenue and to pay for any recurrent expenditure. The second thing is that Pre-COVID, we had already begun looking at the competitiveness from a product offering perspective of our Citizenship by Investment program. We feel that $100,000 donation is already competitive enough from a cost perspective, and Nestor can deal with some of the details and amendments that we've recently made to make the product offering that much better. We do have a real estate option, and we have one real estate project here in St. Lucia that is about to get off the ground with a major hotel brand. And we're also going to be offering a real estate component with a hotel that's twinning with Lausanne University to create a campus here in St. Lucia to offer hospitality training for the Caribbean and Latin America. And certainly that project post-COVID is even more attractive given some of the travel restrictions from a visa perspective that we're seeing going into the United States of America. So it offers those persons to get access to probably one of the best hospitality institutions in the world. The other one that we have done, which was specific for COVID, is that we created a COVID bond, which is for $250,000. It's a 5-year, zero coupon bond, and that a person now can get their citizenship through that facility. So these are some of the things that we have done. This is how we're using our funds, which is to really help us build capacity within the country. St. Lucia only has a GDP of $2.2 billion. If we were to look at Aruba, which has 105,000 people, but 15,000 hotel rooms, St. Lucia only has 4,500 hotel rooms. So we think that there is a clear possibility, and that's certainly what our target is to double and possibly triple our GDP. So we're looking to double our GDP within the next 6 years. And that is despite the impact of COVID. What's interesting for us is that we have a midterm strategy. And when we sat down and reviewed that strategy post-COVID, we were very encouraged because all the things that we were focusing and targeting on actually are more relevant today post-COVID than they were even pre-COVID. And we believe that those investments in education, an e-government platform for government, a simplification of our tax regime, very similar to Estonia, the infrastructure investment that we're making, the modernization of our security force, and also our judicial system, as well as broadening our tourism offering, that these things are very critical in moving forward and helping us to expand our tourism. And the Citizenship by Investment Program is a key source of funding to help facilitate these developments.